Eagle 4718, the body runway 4 position, hold traffic to land 31.
Position runway 4, Eagle flight 4718.
Piedmont 4203, clear to land 31, with 36012, traffic to hold on 4. Taxi 1549, runway 4, cliff takeoff.
Okay, this 1549, cliff.
49.
Flight 1549 started like any other routine flight off LaGuardia. He's going to Charlotte. It's a Westgate departure. So when departing runway 4 takes off, turns left to a 360 heading, maintaining 5,000.
The weather was good. The snow had stopped, the visibility had improved, the winds were light out of the north.
It was just that crystal clear air. It seemed like you could see forever as we took off from LaGuardia.
The takeoff from LaGuardia was one of Jeff's first chances to fly the airplane on this trip.
One leg the captain flies, one leg the first officer flies. Just happened to be my turn to fly the airplane.
Taxi 1549, contact near departure connect.
Good day.
The tower works the departures on the runway, so when they take off, they switch over control of the aircraft to the New York Tracon, which is located in Westbury. It's a separate radar facility, and that's where we take over.
We were handed off to the first radar controller, the departure controller, and that happened to be a young man named Patrick Hudson. And we switched his frequency. I told him we were at 700 feet climbing, and he gave us an immediate clearance to 15,000 feet.
Jack, this 15.9 near departure to contact, I maintain 15,000.
Maintain 1 to 5,000, Cactus 1549.
From that vantage point, we could see much of the New York metropolitan area, and including the Hudson River. It was a beautiful day.
Cactus 15.9, turn left lane 270.
100 seconds after takeoff, we were approaching 3,000 feet in our climb to 15,000 feet. We had just retracted the landing gear and flaps and completed the after takeoff checklist.
And I remember my attention being drawn to something that was slightly above my eyesight and slightly to our right. And it was this line of birds.
These were large birds, a large flock of Canada geese, and they weigh 8 or 10 pounds with 5 foot or 6 foot wingspans.
And they're far too close to fly around. And it was only a moment later that I heard Sully say birds. And then we just started hearing them impact the aircraft.
I could feel and hear the thumps and thuds as we struck the birds across the leading edges of both wings and into the center of the core of both jet engines. Immediately, I could hear terrible noises I'd never heard in an airplane before and feel terrible vibrations. And then within seconds, I could smell coming into the cabin air the burning bird odor from the engines.
And it was a split second later, but it was a second later. Both engines just suddenly lost thrust.
The thrust loss was sudden, complete, and bilaterally symmetrical. In other words, it happened with both engines failing simultaneously. And I could hear the sickening spin down of the turbines as that occurred.
I remember the airspeed tape was just unwinding.
It felt as if the forward motion of the airplane really stopped in midair.
It's almost like your mind stops working for a moment while you evaluate the situation and try to make sense of it.
It was shocking, more than anything I experienced in 42 years of flying and 20,000 hours in the air.
I remember I said, oh shit.
I could feel my blood pressure shoot up, my pulse spike. I sensed my perceptual field narrow because of the stress.
But then slowly your mind starts working again, and it starts working quicker and quicker and quicker.
I remember vividly my first 3 thoughts in those seconds. This can't be happening. And that was followed immediately by, this doesn't happen to me. And then my third thought was a realization that unlike every other flight I'd had, this one probably would not end on a runway with the aircraft undamaged. And I was okay with that, as long as I could solve the problem.
Sully instantly started the auxiliary power unit.
It was imperative that we not lose electrical power.
That is something that's in the checklist, but it's down in the checklist. It's not something that you instinctively do or that we're trained to do as a memory item. But in our case, his starting that APU was very, very important to us because it requires a lot of time to start. And time was something that we did not have.
And then I took control of the airplane. I said, my aircraft. And even in the heat of the moment, Jeff responded verbatim with our important transfer of aircraft control protocol when he answered, your aircraft. And then I said, get the QRH.
So I instantly reached for my quick reference handbook and started to look for the dual engine failure checklist.
And then I made the one radio call. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
This is Cactus 1539. Hit birds to lost thrust on both engines returning back towards LaGuardia.
Okay, you need to return to LaGuardia. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
My first response was I had to let the tower know that there was an emergency returning. He said he wanted to go back to LaGuardia and I was going to make that happen.
Tower, stop your departure's got emergency returning. It's 1529. He bird strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engine, so he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
At that point, we didn't have thrust, and so we were using gravity to provide the forward motion of the airplane to glide downhill. The airplane was still fully controllable. However, I knew that my flight path was soon going to intersect the surface of the Earth.
The checklist for this particular emergency was 4 pages long. It was really designed to be done at 30,000 feet. It wasn't designed to be done at 3,000 feet in 3 minutes' time.
When I first realized the depth of the emergency, I didn't really think about much. I was just really focused on trying to solve the problem, trying to listen to the pilot, understand what he needed, and try to accomplish that, and offer him, different avenues, different routes, different runways for him to land, so that all options were available to him.
Patrick had initially assigned us heading to the southwest. So first I considered returning to LaGuardia, and as Patrick was trying to arrange that for me, I was evaluating that option's worthiness.
Cactus 1529. We can get it to you. Do you want to try to land 1013?
491, we may have been Hudson.
I suspected early on that we would end up in the river, that we wouldn't be able to glide as far as any runway, but I knew I had to consider that possibility. I knew I had to think about trying to do that.
All right, Cactus 1549. It's going to be left traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
When Sully said that we may end up in the Hudson, frankly, I thought that was our only option. Looking around very quickly, really all we had was the possibility of going back to LaGuardia or the Hudson River. Otherwise, as you can imagine, it's just nothing but skyscrapers, roads, houses. It's a very congested area.
If I had chosen to turn back toward LaGuardia and try to reach what turned out to be an unobtainable destination, it would have been an irrevocable choice.
If he had decided to go to LaGuardia, he would have had to fly over the Bronx, parts of New York City.
If I had collided with buildings or with terrain on the way to the airport, likely everyone on the airplane would perish and possibly many people on the ground.
Once over to our right, anything in New Jersey, maybe Teterboro?
Okay, yeah, off your right side is Teterboro Airport. Do you want to try to go to Teterboro?
Yes.
After all the options were exhausted at LaGuardia, Sully asked me about Teterboro, which was off his right side in New Jersey. I thought it was kind of a long shot, but that's not for me to question. I just, if he wants an airport cleared, that's what I do. So I hit the line at Teterboro.
Teterboro, Cactus 1529 over the George Washington Bridge. Wants to go to the airport right now. Does he need assistance? Yes, it was a bird strike. Can I get him in for runway 1? Runway 1, that's good.
I remember pausing in my checklist and looking out at Teterboro, and then I started to see it rise in our windscreen, which to us as pilots means you can't stretch your glide to it. We would be into the buildings before we ever got to the airport.
Cactus 1529, turn right 280, you can land runway 1 at Teterboro.
Sully didn't respond right away, and I remember I was turning to him to say, "You're not going to try for Teterboro," when he said, "We can't make it, we're going to be in the Hudson." And I remember thinking to myself, good.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at Teterboro?
We're going to be in the Hudson.
So he's telling me something that I really don't want to hear.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus?
I heard the words, but I really didn't want to accept it. To me, that was an admission that he was crash landing, and my thoughts were the Ethiopian flight, where the wingtip hits the water right before they're about to land, and it just starts doing cartwheels in the water. I mean, that's what I was envisioning was going to happen.
Shortly after Patrick Hardin had begun to try to arrange an arrival into Teterboro for us, I said, "This is the captain, brace for impact."
That's significant because the flight attendants start into their emergency procedures.
Even through the hardened cockpit door, I could hear the two flight attendants in front, Donna and Sheila, and I'm sure Doreen was doing the same in the back, begin shouting their commands to the passengers in unison. "Brace, brace, heads down, stay down."
Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up at 2 o'clock in about 7 miles.
When I lost radar with him, that was kind of the end for me. I thought probably everyone was dead, and that I was involved with the modern worst aviation incident in modern times, and that was going to be my legacy.
Cactus 15.9, you saw him?
I think he said he was going in the Hudson.
As soon as they could, they got someone to relieve me from position, because at that point I was in no condition to continue working traffic.
Of course, Jeff and I are working together using the checklist, trying to regain trust.
But the truth of the matter is these engines were never going to restart again because of the damage that was done to them.
As we approached the river, the high-rises and the bluffs on both sides of us were beginning to tower over us.
I remember it was kind of an odd feeling to me as the skyscrapers rose up so close off of our left and the buildings in New Jersey off of our right.
The only place we could land in the entire area where rescue could happen fast enough was between the Weehawken and ferry terminals and Pier 79, where New York Waterways ferries ply the river.
What I really remember about that descent to the river for us was all the noise in the cockpit.
Terrain ahead.
We got too close to a helicopter, so we got a traffic call out.
Traffic, clear of conflict.
What we had to do was choose to do only the highest priority items, head north of rest, fly the airplane and fly it well, do something we'd never done before in 208 seconds and get it right the first time. As we approached the river, the only control I had over the vertical flight path was to choose how high to begin the landing, when to begin to raise the nose, to trade some of our forward speed for a reduced rate of descent and touchdown. But we were descending so quickly, even misjudging that height by a quarter second would be catastrophic. I'd either begin the landing too early and get too slow and drop it in, or begin it too late and hit going too fast and nose down. Jeff knew this, and so he began to shift his focus, his priorities. He stopped trying to use the checklist.
I realized we were not going to be able to restart these engines. We were going to be landing this airplane in the Hudson River, and I tried to assist Sully by calling out airspeeds and altitudes to give him situational awareness, because he was focused outside the airplane on where we were actually going to have to land.
I knew it would be a hard landing, I just didn't know how hard. But I was confident that I could make it survivable, and I was confident I could keep the airplane intact, and if I did that, then it would float long enough for us to be rescued. And so in the last 4 seconds of the flight, the last 100 feet, I began to pull the control stick back, further back, until it was finally fully aft, and hold it there just as we touched. But it was a hard hit, harder in back than in front.
When we landed in the river, it seemed like the nose of the airplane was going right for the bottom. Water cascaded up on the windshield, but then almost instantly it just popped up. And I remember it rocking back and forth, kind of in the waves from the touchdown.
It was obvious to Jeff and me that when we stopped in the river, the airplane was intact, it was stable, it was floating, and people were probably still okay at that point.
Sully and I both looked at each other, and we were just surprised that it had worked out so well.
At that moment, Jeff and I turned to each other in the cockpit, and at the same time, in the same words, said, "Well, that wasn't as bad as I thought." My professional obligations, my job wasn't complete until everyone had been accounted for and was safe.
I happened to be looking at Sully right when he received the news that everybody had been saved on board that airplane. And I remember this look of a tremendous relief on his face. And I realized at that moment the worry and the pressure that he had been under for the last few hours since our incident, wondering, had everybody been accounted for?
Many people contributed to this, even though I've gotten all the attention and I've become the public face of it.
I do feel a sense of pride that I accomplished my duties and assisted Sully as best as I could in this situation. I have developed this relationship with Sully over the years, as you might imagine, and that I'm very proud of the fact that I could be his first officer on that day.
I'm very grateful that my crew and all the people involved were up to the many challenges that we faced. It's a source of pride.